Hey you guys, welcome back to the Tomes of Terror show, my little book review series that I do on here. So let's talk about this week's book. Now, because there are, I regret to say, way more worthwhile horror books out there than I will ever have time enough in my life to read, which makes me very sad. When I'm looking for something new to read and review for the series, I tend to rely a lot on recommendations, like from other horror channels that I watch, or, just every now and then I'll go through and do like a blog post or something like that, or sometimes you guys, recommend stuff that sounds really good and stuff like that. So what ended up happening this week was that I had one book that I had bought, like the print version of that somebody recommended, or that I saw recommended somewhere. And while I was kind of into it, it wasn't really that long, but I just couldn't really get into it. And it seemed like kind of like a slog, like to have to finish it. Like before, I will finish it because it is good, but it's just kind of more like experimental. And I just guess I wasn't really in the mood for that this week. So basically I was like, okay, well, I have to read something to get a review up in a timely fashion. So I said, I know what I'll do. I'll just look for a novella or, something like that that's shorter, that I can, that's more compelling, that I can read through really quickly and stuff like that. So basically I go on Google and I do a search for best horror novellas. And I hit upon this list by, I think it was the lineup, and it was called 7 Terrifying Horror Novellas. And the blog post had been published back in December, I think, of 2021. So it was fairly recent. Now, there were a couple of familiar titles on there that I had been wanting to read. However, none of them were available for my Kindle Unlimited plan, except for the last one. So I said, okay, well, this one's free, so I'm going to give this one a whirl. And it's on this list of 7, along with some other books that I'd heard were really good. So I was like, okay, so maybe it'll be really good. So the last one that was listed was a 2020 novella, although it's just barely a novella. I feel like it's a little bit longer than a standard novella. I think it's about 190 pages, something like that. But I hadn't heard of it previously, and it's actually called The Rotting Within by Matt Kurtz. Now, Matt Kurtz, I looked up his bio, and it seems that he started out as a filmmaker, screenwriter, filmmaker, primarily, though it seems like he more pivoted into writing horror books a couple years back. He published his first novel, which was called Kinfolk, back in 2018, and he's also published 3 volumes of short stories. And I have to say, if all of those are as good as The Rotting Within was, then I'm going to have to check out more of his shit, like, sooner rather than later. This one was super fun. I mean, it was like a hell of a ride. It's fast-paced, it's action-packed. It's very, the descriptions of it are very immersive. It really, like, puts you in the world. It's gory. It's disgusting. It's very cinematic. And it's actually, like, scary. Like, it actually has scary parts in it and has a real gut punch of an ending. Everything that we know and like about the horror genre, it's just all in this one tight little package, which, like I said, clocked in a less than 200 pages. This is how you do it if you want to write just a really good, entertaining horror story that just doesn't let up. I mean, this is definitely one of the best ones that I've read recently. Also, somebody needs to make a movie of this, like, yesterday, because I would totally watch it. So the story starts out with 2 very short prologues. Like, the first one is literally like a few paragraphs, and the second one is maybe like a page, like a couple pages. So the first of these prologues has to do with a woman named Shirley. And for reasons that we don't immediately know, she abandons her child and her abusive husband in the dead of night and then goes off to meet a mysterious stranger. Then we have the second prologue, which jumps ahead 15 years. Shirley returns to her former home and her former abusive husband, but now she's different. The dirtbag husband ends up getting torn to shreds in a very graphic and disgusting scene by some kind of monster. And then we get on with the main part of the story. So the bulk of the story takes place 26 years later, like 26 years after that. So we're following a young woman named Kenzie, who seems like a good person at heart, but has tragically bad taste in men. She has 2 kids, 9-year-old Lily and 5-year-old Tim, by 2 different fathers. and lately has been in a very disastrous relationship with yet another abusive dickhead named Paul. Now, she'd been putting up with his shit for a while because she was poor. I think she just worked like as an administrative assistant or something like that, so she didn't really have enough money to live out on her own with her 2 kids and everything. So she needed a roof over her head, so she was willing to like put up with his bullshit just, for a place for her kids to grow up. But after she caught Paul leering at her daughter one morning, and you know what that means, she decided she had to get the fuck out of Dodge ASAP before something really, really horrible happened. So since she was desperate, didn't have any money saved up or anything like that, she ended up stealing several $100s from Paul's hidden stash, packed her kids' shit into her SUV or whatever, and hightailed it out of the state. Now, she didn't really have any close family or friends. Like, her friends had mostly, she had, like, burned bridges with them, or because of her series of abusive boyfriends, he had, like, cut off contact, so he had kind of, like, isolated her from other people, so she didn't really have any close friends, and she doesn't also have any close family. Her mother, Victoria, had died of cancer quite young, like many years before. So Kenzie decides that her only recourse in this situation is she's going to be forced to impose on her only remaining family member, her grandmother, Shirley, who, again, was from the beginning of the book. Now, she's actually never met her. Through her mom, like before her mom died, she found out that Shirley runs this out-of-the-way bed and breakfast in this small town in Texas. So she is able to sort of like call around and find out where Shirley is, like where the inn is that she runs. And when she talks to Shirley on the phone, she finds out that Shirley seems like a lovely person and is more than welcoming. Yes, please come out here. So Kenzie also hopes that not only will she be reconnecting with family and have a place to stay, but because it's sort of out in the middle of nowhere and she doesn't think that her boyfriend knows where it is, she's like, okay, well, we're just going to escape and he's not going to know where we're going and he won't be able to find us out there. So it's win-win. So Kenzie and the kids get to the Sunrise bed and breakfast. And at first, everything just seems idyllic. At first, as usual in these kind of stories. Shirley, is exactly the kind of grandmother you could ever hope for, that anyone could ever hope for. And she basically offers Kenzie and the kids, she's like, you can stay here as long as you need to. And she even agrees, like, she puts Kenzie to work in the inn, so she doesn't feel like she's getting charity or whatever. And she's like, look, it's only just me working here, so I need help anyway. So you'd be doing me a favor. Shirley says, we don't really have that many visitors anymore. We're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. But we do have people wandering in from time to time. And she likes to keep it ready for them. So they keep it, like, super clean and everything is, like, ready for guests. It turns out, though, that the inn does have 2 very long-term residents. And this is a pair of elderly ladies who live in the only 2 rooms on the 3rd floor and have lived there quite quietly, a little bit like hermits, for more than 30 years. They're like friends of Shirley's. Now, the slightly younger woman, whose name is Myrna, is a bit abrasive, like doesn't really have a lot of social graces, like kind of just like blurts out what she thinks. But she otherwise seems decent enough. The other woman, who is much older, is named Lucille, and she's apparently bedridden, so for a long time in the story, you never see her. Myrna takes care of the old woman, explaining she's her nurse or whatever. Kenzie and the kids, like, even though they are kind of, like, put to work around the inn, like, putting away linens and things like that, but they're like, well, just try to stay away from the 3rd floor, other than like taking food up to them and stuff like that. Just don't disturb them because they really like their privacy and stuff like that. So kind of like keep to your quarters on the lower floors unless it's absolutely unavoidable. So at this point, Kenzie is starting to think, hey, maybe I'm finally getting my life back together. This inn, it's like this gorgeous old place. Shirley, her grandmother, is very, very sweet, very supportive, and apparently her dirtbag ex-boyfriend, Paul, has no idea where she is and doesn't really have much way of finding her. Also, shortly after she arrives, this handsome new guest named Ben kind of blows in, And Kenzie befriends him, and she's like, oh, it's nice to be able to, like, kind of talk. And sometimes they kind of flirt and, like, drink wine out on the porch and chat or whatever. But she kind of keeps him at arm's length a little bit, keeps things platonic, because it seems that maybe he might be on the run from the law, you know, and Lord knows she doesn't need to be going down that road again, given her history. But of course, this is a horror story. So there are some weird things going on in this place. Some said weird things include kind of like weird noises behind the walls and like thumping up in the attic, stuff like that. Doors sometimes being open when they could have, when they should be closed. There's like weird shadows kind of moving around the house, unexplained cold breaths on the back of your neck every now and then, shit like that. And Myrna, the younger of the two old ladies, when she finally appears, seems helpful, you know, especially like when one of the kids gets sick, and like I said, she was a nurse and she seems super helpful and everything, but she's also very blunt and she's very caustic, and she has these kind of like bizarre mannerisms that, you know, that Kenzie can't really like figure out what it is. There's also kind of weird shit where the house is sort of like surrounded by these woods, and there does seem to be like something out in the woods, and there's like weird symbols like carved into some of the trees, shit like that. Also, the youngest kid, Tim, who is 5, he watches a scary movie one night against the wishes of his mom, and he has what seems to be a nightmare about a naked old lady hovering over his sister's bed, like doing stuff to her. So, you know, there's that. Now, only a few days after Kenzie moves into the B&B, Shirley is unexpectedly called away to stay with a sick friend, leaving Kenzie in charge of the place. Now, this is stressful enough, obviously, especially for somebody as unsure of herself as Kenzie is. I mean, she's only been here a couple of days, and she's not really sure she can run this by herself without fucking it up. So that's stressful enough, but then all of this other kind of stressful shit happens. Turns out there's this line of really, really horrible thunderstorms and flooding and stuff like that heading their way, which, you know, obviously will end up, like, knocking out the power and phones and shit like that. Both of the kids have fallen ill with some mysterious illness and can't really eat or get out of bed and are like vomiting and stuff. Turns out that Kenzie's boyfriend Paul might have figured out where they are after all, and is possibly on his way there, like to exact some retribution for her like taking off and stealing his money. And oh, by the way, there might also be some kind of supernatural creature of some kind creeping around in the house with them. So, as I mentioned, I mean, this is just about as perfect a horror story as you could possibly want. It's page turning, it's riveting, it's gross and disgusting, there's gore, it's tense, it's creepy, and as the story goes on, like, the stakes just keep getting higher and higher and higher. Like, she just keeps getting in, like, worse and worse and worse, like, and it's just kind of like this compounding, like, thing of, like, this shitstorm of, like, stuff coming at her. It's also really, really, like, beautifully written, and it sort of kind of plunges you into the story with these really, I mean, it's the way that things are described, it's very succinct, but it's very vivid, so you can really kind of like see it. That's why I meant when I said it was cinematic, like you can really see the whole thing like playing out in your head, which, like I said, you know, Matt Kurtz would start out as a filmmaker, so that shouldn't be a surprise, I guess. Also love that the author went all in with a really wrenching ending. Seriously, as soon as I was getting toward the end and I figured out what was happening, I legit, like, out loud said, oh no, I just went like that, like, as soon as I figured out what it was. So I got, like, real, I was like, oh shit, no, oh, that's awful. So yeah, it was like that. I mean, take all of those things, weave all of that together with, and you also have kind of like a sprinkling of sort of quick references to, you know, horror classics, Rosemary's Baby, there's a little bit of Burnt Offerings in there, stuff like that. I mean, this was just a really, really damn good slice of delicious horror goodness, and really more people need to read this. Like I said, if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it on there for free like I did, but I mean, something this good probably be better to like buy the print, which I probably will as well, because I really, really liked this a lot, and I would like to reread it at some point in the future. So yeah, if you just want something that's just like a fun, gory, scary, like roller coaster ride, like a classic horror story with some nods and homages to like classic horror, but it's kind of like its own thing, then I would definitely recommend this. I had a blast with it, and I think you will too. It seems to have pretty overwhelmingly positive reviews on Goodreads, if that tells you anything. So check it out, or if you've read it, let me know what you think about it in the comments, and we'll have a discussion about it. And that will do it for this Tomes of Terror. I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.